of 2 Samuel. If you will, turn to 2 Samuel chapter 10. And Mark, when you're ready, let me know. Our goal is try to do chapter 10 and chapter 11 if we can. Chapter 10 is not that much, but chapter 11 is a little more detailed. Facebook, if you're joining with us on Sunday night, we always do a Bible study on 2 Samuel where we are tonight. We're in chapter 10. So if you have your Bible and you'd like to join in with that Bible study tonight, we ask you to get your Bible at home just like we have our Bible here, and we'll take these. As you remember, last time we went through, we was in chapter 9, and David at that period of time had a little time in his kingship where it was peaceful, and so he went looking for somebody in Saul's family to be kind to. And lo and behold, he found a son of Jonathan. His name was Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth, they went and got him, brought him. He gave back Saul's kingdom that he had and put Saul's servant Ziba and his staff in charge of it, and told Mephibosheth that he could always stay with him in his palace that he had as king. And so now as we leave that and all that happened at that time, we come to chapter 10. And so now I want you to understand when we see that they were back at war again, it's funny how they worked at this time, and we'll see in reading this, and I want you to understand that there was a season for war during this period of time. They didn't just go fight any time, and to help you understand that, we still do that in essence here. You might not understand it, and because of some ways that we fight, you might not realize we do this, but a prime example is the Vietnam War. In the Vietnam War, even though it lasted for a long period of time, there was seasonal fighting doing in Vietnam because there was a lot of heavy rains, what they call monsoons. And during that time when the monsoons come, it would get so muddy and there'd be so much rain. If you ever watched a Forrest Gump movie, you could hear them talking about that. But at the period of times when they even had all the rain and stuff, the planes and the helicopter stuff had to be grounded, and they could not fight. And so there was seasonal fighting even going on during the Vietnam War. There are certain times that we look at now that we fight, we say, well, is it a good time to go and try to do this with all that's going on in the troops? But a lot of our warfare now is not done by hand-to-hand contact on the ground. It's done by warfare through ships, through planes, and things of this nature. So I want you to see as we come to chapter 10, and there was a period of time of peace, this is the way it's done, there was a season for passing. Now, we're going to see in chapter 10 that David, in the goodness of his heart, was trying to do something good. But David is such a warrior and have shed so much blood, nobody's going to trust David now, even when he's trying to do an act of kindship. So watch in chapter 10 as we go through this. And it came to pass after this that the king of the children of Ammon is the king that showed favor to David that period of time. He was really good to David, and David never forgot it. So that the king of the children of Ammon died, and Hanun, his son, reigned in his stead. So Ammon died, Hanun's the king. Then said David, I will show kindness unto Hanun, the son of Nahash, as his father showed kindness unto me. So David sent to comfort him by the hand of his servants for his father, and David's servants came into the land of the children of Ammon. Now, David wanted to do a good thing for this guy because they showed kindness to him, and he said that the guy's father has died and he's back in things. So let me send an entourage into the land to show them kindness. Now, we think that's a great thing. You know, on paper, looking at it, David probably thought in his mind, boy, this would be a nice thing to do. But David's been beaten. I want you to realize he's been beating everybody. He's been taking over land left and right. He's been just killing people and just doing what he's doing. He's building his empire just by vast proportions. So you can see where these people here would be a little bit weary. And the princes of the children of Ammon said unto Hanun, their lord, thinkest thou that David doth honor thy father, that he hath sent comforters unto thee? Now, could you imagine how they were talking very similar to how I was doing? You really think David's doing this? You know, I think they put a lot of emphasis on the word David. You think David's doing that? Hath not David rather sent his servants unto thee to search the city and to spy it out and to overthrow it? They've already planted a seed of bad where David meant a seed of good. Now, only David knows if he was sincere in his heart. He sent the men. Did he really do what they were saying? They thought he did, and that's all that matters. So when that happened, wherefore Hanun took David's servants. Now watch this. If you look at it from the point I did, it's sort of funny. These servants come here with David and said, don't you go do anything. You go and carry this and do honor for them. So Hanun took David's servants and shaved off 1/2 of their beards. Now, a man's beard in that period of time is something special. Did you know I read an article about the Amish and their beards? You know, all the Amish have beards. And did you know that I don't think they grow a beard or are allowed to grow a beard until they get married. And then when they get married, if I'm correct, then the beard is a sign of something special. So a man would not dare shave his beard off. Likewise, I'm telling you that that's the Amish people here in America. Likewise, the man's beard means something special to him during that period of time. You just don't mess with a man's beard. And Hanun didn't shave the whole beard off. He shaved 1/2 of it off. Could you imagine how to look? But he didn't quit then. He cut off their garments in the middle, even to their buttocks, and sent them away. He totally disgraced the men that David sent to honor. And when they told it unto David, now how do you think David's going to react to this? When they told it unto David, he sent to meet them because the men were greatly ashamed. Could you imagine coming back with half your beard and your butt showing? Could you you got to see some humor in the Bible at times. If you don't see it, then something's wrong. But I can see these men coming back. David, look what they did to us. And probably those men would have been ready to fight, but David told them, don't you do anything to them. We've come to show our goodness and grace to them. And they were greatly ashamed. And the king says, I want you now to tarry at Jericho until your beards be grown back, and then you can return. Because he said, the men said, we're not going back to the people and let them see us like this, are we, David? And David says, no, you stay right here in Jericho until your beards grow back. So when the children of Ammon saw that they stank, and that word stank, if you have to look and translate, had made them, before David, the children of Ammon sent and hired the Syrians of Bethrob and the Syrians of Zobah, 20,000 footmen, and the king of Maacah, 1,000 men, and Ishtob, 12,000 men. The children of Ammon weren't able to fight. No, they knew they would not have a chance at fighting David's army. So what they did, they went and hired professional fighters. These are the Syrians. They hired the Syrians of Bethrob and the Syrians of Zobah, 20,000 footmen, and the king of Maacah, 1,000 men, and Ishtob, 12,000 men. They hired all of these men to do their fighting for them. It says, we know David's coming, and so we want to be ready. When David comes, we're going to be ready. And when David heard of it, he sent Joab. You remember who Joab was? Who's Joab? If you don't understand who he is, that's David's general of his army. He sent Joab and all the host of the mighty men. And the children of Ammon came out and put the battle in array at the entering in the gate. And the Syrians of Zobah and of Rehob and Ishtob and Maacah were by themselves in the field. Now when Joab saw that the front of the battle was against him, before and behind, it says he then saw, because he saw they'd hired these professional fighters of Syria. So when he did that, he chose of all the choice men of Israel. He says, David, I got to have my very best. They went and hired these fighters. It's not just them. They've got these others. So I've got to have my very best men. He chose the men of Israel, and he put them in an array against the Syrians. Now, his main purpose here was to keep the two forces that they'd hired to be able to come together to make one. They were very strategic in how they fought. And the rest of the people he delivered into the hand of Abishai, his brother, that he might put them in array against the children of Ammon. What he was doing here when he used Abishai, his brother, was to keep the two forces apart rather than letting them come together to join in one. And he said this to his brother. He said, if the Syrians be too strong for me, then thou shalt help me. But if the children of Ammon be too strong for thee, then I will come and help thee. By them separating their forces in two different battles, they could control the battle better. If they joined together and it was too much for either one of them, then they were at loss. So they had a strategic plan in place. But he said, be of good courage, and let us play the men for our people and for the cities of our God. And the Lord do that which seemeth him good. And Joab, it said, drew nigh, and the people that were with him into the battle against the Syrians. And when that happened, he had some of the choice fighters. Look what they did. It said they fled before him. I'm telling you, hired fighters will not fight like home people will. I tell you one thing I think in America that we have going for us. I think a lot of people are trying to figure us out, but they know how many guns we got, and they know you coming on our land, and they figure that they got 330 million. I assume half of us are maybe men. And this is all of them's got guns. I don't think they can quite figure it out. But they can make things hard for us. But likewise, the Syrians, when they saw the battle, they fled. And when the children of Ammon saw that the Syrians were fled, then they fled also. Now, ain't it funny? You hired these guys to fight for you, supposed to be professional fighters. And here you're out there fighting, and when the battle before it even gets started good, they're looking, look at them, they're gone. And so the ones that was part of it, with Abishai, they entered into the city. So Joab returned from the children of Ammon and came to Jerusalem. When the Syrians saw that they were smitten before Israel, they gathered themselves together. And Hadarezer sent and brought out the Syrians that were beyond the river. They came to Helam, and Shobach, the captain of the host of Hadarezer, went before them. And when it was told David, he gathered all Israel together and passed over Jordan and came to Helam. And the Syrians set themselves in array against David and fought with him there. And the Syrians fled before Israel, and David slew the men, 700 chariots of the Syrians, and 40,000 horsemen, and he smote Shobach, the captain of their host, who died there. And when all the kings that were servants to Hadarezer saw that they were smitten before Israel, they made peace with Israel and served them. That's what happens when you defeated. They just have to bow down to him and says, all right, we'll honor you anymore. And so the Syrians feared to help the children of Ammon anymore. And so we see that David once again was victorious in the battle. Now as we come here, we see that David has joined the kingdom of Israel together. He's their one king. He's been very beneficial in all the wars that he's fought. He's increased his kingdom. He's had him a big, nice palace built. Now, where was David staying at before he became king? This is very important to make note before we go to chapter 11. David had to live in caves during that period of time because he was hiding from Saul. You remember, Saul even went to one of the caves that him and his men was in. You remember, he'd come and he could have killed Saul at that period of time. David did not have very good living situations while he was running and hiding from Saul. But now, he's got a palace fit for a king. That changes things. That can also make you become lazy. We're going to see in chapter 11, something very bad happens to David because he's not where he's supposed to be. And it came to pass in chapter 11 that after a year was expired, at the time when kings go forth to battle, this is what I'm telling you about. There are certain times that kings go out to battle. I thought it was amazing that, well, it's time to go fight more. Let's go find somebody to fight with us and let's see what we can do. It was just what they like to do. That was sort of like entertainment at that time to go. So it come time when kings go forth to battle that David, notice what it did. It said it was time for kings to go to battle, but David did what? He sent Joab and his servants with him and all of Israel. And it says they destroyed the children of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. But look what David did. David tarried still at Jerusalem. Here's the first sin that David did. Where's David supposed to be? With his men. He's supposed to be at battle. But he didn't. Now why do you think David didn't go? David's got a little lazy. He's got him a nice palace. He's got him a lot of wives. He's got him a lot of concubines. He's got people to fix his food. He's living a life of luxury. David just liked to be here. And David feels like, well, God's just blessed us so much, and I got one of the best generals there ever was in Joab, so I'll just send Joab and I'll send my army out and I'll just stay here. Now, the king probably had a right to do that, but it was not right in God's eyes, because it says when kings go forth to battle. The king, during this period of time, always went out with his men to fight. Saul, he died on the battlefield fighting with his men. Kings went out to fight. And it came to pass in verse 2, in an eventide, that David arose off of his bed and walked upon the roof of the king's house. Now, during this period of time, everybody had flat houses. And one of the places they went in the afternoon, it was hot, they would climb up onto the roof. And it was upon the roof where they spent a lot of time. David was no different. He arose from off his bed, walked upon the roof of the king's house, and from the roof he saw a woman washing herself. And the woman was very beautiful to look upon. Now, David hadn't done anything wrong at this time. The biggest thing he did wrong, he should have been at the battle. If he had been out to battle, none of this would ever happen. He wouldn't have been on the roof. He wouldn't see a beautiful woman washing herself. We're not sure what part Bathsheba had in it. Did Bathsheba know the king always walked upon the roof at that time of the night? Did she purposeful go in her place where she was at, as we'll see? Did she do what she did on purpose, trying to catch the king's attention? And did she have a part in that? Irregardless, it was David's actions that caused the sin. She'll have to answer for what she did. When David saw her, if he would have just let it go, but he didn't, he said he sent in verse 3 and inquired after the woman. And one said, is this not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? Now, Uriah the Hittite was a foreigner, but he was a good fighter in David's army. David knew who he was. And when he found out, and they sent and they inquired that this was Bathsheba, and she's married to one of your fighters that's out there in the war at this time. David's been to war with the people. He's fought probably right alongside of Uriah. He knew Uriah. But yet, for that moment, lust got in the way. And he didn't care. And that made it even worse. It says after this, even though he found out who it was, David sent his messengers and took her. Now it says, you have to read it for what it says. It says took her like she didn't have a choice. They said they took her like the king wants to see you. You need to come with us. So he sent messengers. He took her, and she came in unto him, and he lay with her. For she was purified from her uncleanness, and then she returned unto her house. After he laid with her, they sort of cleaned her up. He had his maids or whatever do clean her up. Then she was sent back to his house. What David was looking for, he lusted. He saw a beautiful woman. I don't care if she's married. I don't care who she's wanting to. I want her tonight. I want her brought to me, and I'll have her tonight. And he did what he did, and he was looking for a one-night affair, and he was going to be done. But it didn't work out. It's funny how God works things out at times. Because look what happened in verse 5. From one time together, it says, and the woman conceived, and sent and told David, I am with child. Lo, I wonder how many times that has been told to a man anywhere and changed his life. So David, he was in a tough situation because he had did something wrong, and people would have really thought hard. It would help morale with the troops. Could you imagine the troops if it got out to his troops that, David didn't go to war with them, but if it got out that the king's going with your wives while you're out here fighting his wars? That don't sound good, do it? But yet, that's what it would have been. So David couldn't have that. Now, David had a very small group that knew about it, the ones that went to get her, and probably a few right here, and he probably began thinking, well, man, I got to fix this. You see, that's where we always get deeper in. When we sin, instead of just coming to God and say, God, man, I sin, I need you to forgive me. But see, David didn't do that. David began thinking, how in the world can I cover this up? Most times when we start lying just doesn't work out well. It just causes more hardships. So David says, well, I know what I got to do if she's pregnant. They probably didn't keep up with dates and everything as good as we did now. Because nowadays we keep up with dates so good, and from the time you get pregnant until the time you have a child, you know it, because if she knows that she was pregnant, it had to be a good 6 weeks possibly after they'd been together. And so he says, I got to get Uriah here. And so David sent to Joab, his general, and he said, send me Uriah the Hittite. And it said Joab sent Uriah to David. All David was caring about, I got to get Uriah back home. He's got to get into bed with Bathsheba. They've got to have their night together. Then I can send them back out and everything will be fine. And there's no way they can say that I have any part in this. And when Uriah was coming to him, David demanded of him how Joab did and how the people did and how the wars prospered. Well, see, David didn't really bring him just caring about how to find out about the war, but he had to make Uriah think, Uriah, you just come, I need to get a report about the war, so I told Joab to send you, so tell me how Joab's doing, how the people are going, how's the war going, and everything. So Uriah come, did everything that the king asked him. Then look what David told him in verse 8. And David said to Uriah, all right, Uriah, thank you for the information. Now you go on down to thy house, and you wash your feet. And it says Uriah departed out of the king's house, and there followed him a whole mess of meat from the king. Now that just doesn't happen. He was treating Uriah just the best. And he says, Uriah, now what you going down? Your wife Bathsheba down there, she's waiting to see you. Hadn't seen you. Well, y'all go ahead down there and have a good night. So David, after he says, go ahead and send them some food down there. I want them to have a good time. So David was probably feeling pretty good about everything happening, and probably went ahead and got him a good night's sleep. He woke up the next morning, look what he found out in verse 9. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of his lord, and went not down to his house. Can you imagine how the king felt the next morning? I thought I had this thing worked out. And some of them said, well, Uriah didn't go down to Bathsheba's house. He didn't go down there. No, he slept at your door. And when they had told David all this, saying Uriah went not down into his house, David said unto Uriah, camest thou not from thy journey? Why then did thou not go down to thine house? He says, I can't believe you didn't want to go see your wife. And Uriah said unto David, and you got to really respect Uriah now. Uriah said unto David, the ark in Israel and Judah, they abide in tents. And my lord Joab and the servants of my lord, they are encamped in open fields. Shall I then go into mine house to eat and drink and to lie with my wife? He says, as thou livest and as thy soul liveth, I will not do this thing. It made you respect Uriah that much more. Even though he loved his wife, he'd probably love to go there. He was such a true servant in David's army that he would not. He would not do his fellow men like that. He would not enjoy one night while they were out there in the field and they were still fighting. So you think David would give up? And many of you know this story already, but it's good to refresh our mind about it. It says, David said then to Uriah, well, Uriah, will hang with me here, if you will. Tarry with me here today also. And tomorrow I will let thee depart. So it said Uriah abode in Jerusalem that day and tomorrow. And when David had called him, it said he did eat and drink before him. And he made him drunk. David says, well, if he won't go on his own, I'll just keep feeding him enough wine till he's drunk. And then he won't be himself and he'll go. And he made him drunk, and at even he went out to lie on his bed with the servants of his Lord. But once again he went not down to his house. Twice David had tried. First he just told him to go, sent some meat. Second time David got him drunk, thought he would go, but still he laid down with the servants, did not go. So what's David supposed to do? His problem's still not fixed. Bathsheba's still pregnant, and Uriah has not went into her. And it came to pass in the morning that David wrote a letter to Joab and he sent it by the hand of Uriah. Now Uriah was carrying his own death letter, but it was not their nature to open up the king's letter, because the king's letter was written to Joab, his general, and it was for the general to see only. And so the letter said this, and he wrote in the letter saying, I want you to set Uriah in the forefront of the hottest battle. And then I want y'all to retire from him or pull back, that he may be smitten and he die. That's David's writings to Joab. David had just soon killed him while he was at the palace. At the very front of the battle where he's at, there's always soldiers that they put up there that then they have to sacrifice for the better good of the war. That's the hottest part of the battle. Just about everybody at that place of the battle will be killed. And he's asking him, they don't usually put the very best fighters up there either. They put some of their so-so fighters to be the first infantry to go through. And it came to pass, when Joab observed the city, that he assigned Uriah into a place where he knew that valiant men were of the opposite side. And the men of the city went out, and they fought with Joab. And there fell some of the people of the servants of David. And it says Uriah the Hittite died also. Joab as general did not have any choice but to follow the king's orders. The king had ordered for Uriah to be put at the very front so he would be smitten and died. Joab, being a good general for David, did exactly what David asked him to do. After this, then Joab sent and told David all the things concerning the war. The biggest thing he wanted to tell him was about Uriah the Hittite. And he told the messenger, because he couldn't let the messenger in on what really happened, because it was a secret letter sent only to Joab. But he told the messenger, so he said he charged the messenger, saying, when thou hast made an end of telling the matters of the war unto the king, if it so be that the king's wrath arise after you tell him what you got to tell him, and he say unto thee, wherefore approach ye so nigh unto the city, and when ye did fight, knew ye not that they would shoot from the wall? And what he was talking about, if he showed wrath because Uriah got killed, did he act like, well, didn't you know they'd be shooting from the wall? Didn't you know some of these men would be killed? And he says, who smote Abimelech, the son of Jerubbesheth, did not a woman cast a piece of millstone upon him from the wall that he died in, the Bez? Why went you nigh the wall? Then say thou to him, thy servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. He says, when you start telling about all the other people that got killed because of what just happened, see, David's sin, part of the sin a lot of people don't realize, not only killed Uriah, but a lot of other men got killed also. And so when the messenger began to tell King David about it, and you said if he starts acting like this and starts getting all upset, go ahead and tell him, well, Uriah the Hittite is dead also. That's Joab's way of telling him, King, we did what you told us to do. Put him in the hottest part of the battle and then pull back from him. So the messenger went and came and showed David all that Joab had sent him for. And the messenger said unto David, surely the men prevailed against us, and came out unto us into the field, and we were upon them even unto the entering of the gate. And the shooter shot from off the wall upon thy servants, and some of the king's servants be dead. And after he told him that, he says, and thy servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. Then David said unto the messenger, thus shalt thou say unto Joab. Now listen how David responds to this. This is interesting. Let not this thing displease thee, for the sword divideth one as well as another. Make thy battle now more strong against the city, and overthrow it, and encourage thou him. And when the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah her husband was dead, look what Bathsheba did. It says she mourned for her husband. And when the mourning was past, Look what David did. He sent and he fetched her to his house, and she became his wife, and she bare him a son. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. Now let's break down just a little bit in the time we have. We've went through. What would have been the best way, since we know the whole story, what would have been the best way for David to have handled this situation? Well, the best thing to do anytime when he first walked on, first thing he should have done was went to battle with his men. If he went to battle with his men, none of this would have happened. The second thing, when he was on the roof and he saw Bathsheba, whether she was intentionally showing herself or what, when he found out that she was married to one of his soldiers, the best thing then was to let it go. But can I ask you something? Don't you imagine that we have many other marriages that's been broken apart because of this word called lust? Now, hopefully we haven't had murders involved, but I imagine through the years there have been murders involved dealing with people in situations very similar to what we see here that we just don't know. This is laid out before us for us to understand. Now, it says in verse 27 that what David did displeased the Lord. And we're going to stop there rather than try to get into chapter 12. But just so you know, you Bible scholars that already probably know ahead, what's God going to do? How's he going to reveal it? Because David thinks in his mind, well, that was close. I'm glad that's over with. I'm glad I finally got by with that. But what's he going to do?
Take his son. Nathan the prophet.
Going to take Nathan the prophet. Nathan the prophet's going to come, and God's going to reveal it to Nathan what he'd done. And then also, as we go ahead and we'll study it, what's going to happen to this child. And see, God's not pleased. And God's watching everything, and God's not going to let it go. I can think of times right now I didn't find out till afterwards of people think that they've got by with something, that God's brought it to light later on. It's just like some of the things that's happened in some of the churches, the Catholic Church and some of the other churches. And things that happened in the Baptist church. These things were hidden for years, but God's brought it to light. And just brought shame upon the men that did it, but also shame into the denominations. I'm just telling you, it's better, if you've got sin in your life, it's better to confess that sin than it is to kneel, to wait and see if God maybe just will let it ride. David never confessed it. David wanted just as few people to know about it. And I'm really surprised at David during this period of time, because he was always a man who would include God in everything. And if you read Psalms, which David wrote most of the Psalms, he was so close, but that you can see how a man panics and everything's going so good, and he knows what God did to Saul and how he took the kingdom from him. I wonder if David, in his naive state of mind, thought, well, maybe I can get this one over on God. Maybe God won't know anything about it. But God's getting ready to show him in a mighty way. So we're going to close tonight. We didn't even sing a song to start with, so we're going to close tonight and sing our song for this morning, because we know Jeff and Elaine didn't get a chance to sing it. So let's stand and sing God Is So Good as we close tonight.
You know, I think it's kind of a good example